Hi, I'm Lori Ray Anderson with Shoreline Church Dress a Girl, and we are now going to do the elastic in the casings at the top of the dress. I use a small safety pin to guide my elastic through the dress. You just insert it into one end, feed it through until the elastic comes right up to the edge of the dress. When it's right at the edge here, you're going to sew back and forth. I usually go about 4 times back and forth. Here's an example of one that's done. So my elastic and my safety pin, there's my safety pin, it's already in there, and I've sewn back and forth about 4 times. Trim it off very closely and neatly, because once you go to put your bias tape on, if there's a lot of stuff hanging out like this is, then it pushes the bias tape out further. So you want to trim it very close to the edge of your stitches. So I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to sew this on and finish it. But in the meantime, I want to show you how to finish the back one. When I am putting my elastic in, I like to leave this edge as flat as possible when I'm going to sew this other side. So leaving all of the elastic bunched up in the center leaves the edges a lot flatter and then easier to put the bias tape on. So when I get my elastic out to this side, pull my elastic back to where it's just right at the edge. And then again, same as I did here, I'm going to sew back and forth several times. So I'll be right back after I go to the sewing machine and sew this on. Okay, we're back. And you can see that I have sewn the elastic on both sides. I'm just going to trim up some of these little random threads so that my edges are nice and even on each side. All 4 sides are nice and straight. Again, I left as much as I can bunched up in the center so that my edges are as flat as possible. Now I turn my dress using the front and the back sides together so that I have the armholes exposed. We use our bias tape that is provided in the kit. There are 2 pieces. First thing I do is I find the center of the bias tape, putting the ends together and finding the center here. I open it up and I use my fingernails to kind of mark the center line. There is a center line that has been pressed into your dress along the side. This is the side seam. It's a fold, side fold. That's the center of the underarm. This is the center of your bias tape. Place them together so that they are lined up, and then place your dress on the center fold line of the bias tape. Now, you can do your bias tape straps whatever way works best for you, but this is the way I like to do mine. I use these quilting clips rather than pins because it doesn't bend the dress. You just fold it over the top edge of the dress. So open your bias tape up, lay your dress along the center fold line of the bias tape, fold it over, and pin it. Repeat the same thing on the opposite shoulder of the dress. So this is the front and the back of the dress on one side. Then we do the same thing for the front and the back of the dress on the other side. You can understand now why trimming that sewn edge to be as flat as possible helps, because it makes it fall into the line here much nicer. That's one side of the dress. Flip the dress. Do the same thing to the other side. So now I have, go back to the front of my dress for you. I have my 2 armholes pinned with the bias tape straps. I'm going to go over to my machine and we're going to sew this. You can sew any way you want to finish this off. I like to sew mine with a zigzag stitch, a small zigzag, and I go right along this edge so that I'm catching front and back. Some people sew it with a straight stitch. Some people will sew it with a decorative stitch. Anything is fine as long as you catch the dress, the front of the strap, and the back of the strap. One more thing I forgot to mention. Bias tape is normally pressed so that there is a tiny bit shorter piece. So the bottom, the back side is longer than the top front side. I put the smaller piece on the top, the longer piece on the bottom, so that when I'm sewing this top piece and I'm following along the edge, I know automatically it's catching the bottom piece. And I'm hoping that you can see the tiny bit of extra on the bottom of that. So let's go over to the sewing machine and we'll finish this dress. This is the last step. We're going to sew our bias tape straps all the way and then we are done. Okay, we are back at the machine now and we're going to sew on the bias tape straps. So I start at the front of my dress, the top of the strap. This is the back side of the dress. I sew it so that I'm sewing the open edge to my left. And the reason I do that, you'll see as we go through, then my dress is passing along the outside of the sewing machine rather than the inside of the sewing machine. So let's get this started. So now you can see that the dress is coming in, that it's coming off on my left. You want to keep your dress pushed in, making sure that as you remove your clips or your straight pins that you're using, that you keep the dress pushed all the way to the back edge of the bias tape so that I can feel it right up along this back edge here so that it is gripping the best that it can on the dress. Also make sure that you're always keeping your dress out of the way so that you're only sewing what you really want to sew. It's very easy to get your dress pushed up underneath of where you're sewing and then causing yourself problems. So here is a little trick that I've learned. This is my 779th dress, and I have made some changes along the way and have learned little shortcuts that make things easier for me. I'm finishing this side, and you can see how I've sewn right along the edge there. What I do then is along the same edge, I get my next strap ready. And then when I finish one strap, I sew off of it and on to the next. It's just, for me, a little bit of a time saver. And I like the way it transitions over better than starting and stopping. So that's just something I do. You could sew to the end and stop and then start the next one if you want. When we're done with these, I gather up all 4 ends. These 2 where I've just sewn off of one and right on to the next. And then I give these a nice straight trim, cutting off those start and stop edges so that everything is nice and tidy. You are all done. Gently stretch your dress out so that the elastic is more even. Be really careful that you have sewn your elastic in tight, and when you are pulling this, that you're not being too rough on it. The last thing you want to do is pop the elastic out of the corner and have to redo everything. But these are the straps now. The little girl will tie over her shoulders, making her dress complete. There you go.